Good evening, friends. Good evening, fiends. Good evening, Dovahkiin Supremes. Welcome back to the nerdier side of a bit late. I hope the evening finds you doing well. Tonight we are continuing and wrapping up the 4-part series, The Adventures of Eslaf Erol, with Warrior and King. So I do hope you are ready to level up some more stats and hear an actually happy tale from the unforgiving Skyrim? Get comfy, get cozy, probably fur armor is a good choice for our chilly location, and follow my voice into Warrior by Reven. This is the 3rd book in a 4-book series. If you have not read the first 2 books, Beggar and Thief, you would be well advised to do so. You have been well advised, and dear Night Owl, you can catch up with this video here if you need to. We got you, Reven, we got you. Eslaf Erol did not know much of his past, nor did he care to. As a child, he had lived in Aeroguard, but the kingdom was very poor and taxes were, as a result, very high. He was too young to manage his abundant inheritance, but his servants, fearing that their master would be ruined, moved him to Jotunheim. No one knew why that location was picked. Some old maid, long dead now, had thought it was a good place to raise a child. No one else had a better idea. There may have been children with more pampered, more spoiled existence than young Sweebud, but that is doubtful. As he grew, he understood that he was rich, but he had nothing else. No family, no social position, no security at all. Loyalty, he found out on more than one occasion, cannot truly be bought. Knowing that he had but one asset, a vast fortune, he was determined to protect it and, if possible, increase it. Because some is not enough, I guess. Some otherwise perfectly nice people are greedy, but Sweebud was that rare accident of nature or breeding who has no other interest but acquiring and hoarding gold. Cool, so he's a dragon, essentially, human dragon. He was willing to do anything to increase his fortune. Most recently, he had begun secretly hiding mercenaries to attack desirable properties, and then buying them when no one wanted to live there anymore. Oh my gosh, he's terrible. The attacks would then, of course, cease, and Sweebud would have a profitable land which he had purchased for a song. It had begun with a few small farms, but recently he had begun a more ambitious campaign. In north-central Skyrim, there is an area called the Alto, which is of unique geographical interest. It is a dormant volcanic valley surrounded on all sides by glaciers, so that the earth is hot from a volcano, but the constant water drizzle and air is frigid. A grape called jaspe grows there comfortably, and elsewhere in Tamriel, it withers and dies. Oh, the jaspes are so frustrating. It took me forever to complete that quest, unlike every playthrough, because once you get the Archmage's Tower, you get like 5, and then they don't regrow, even though they should, and you've left it months apart. Whatever. I'm not mad. The strange vineyard is privately owned, and the wine produced from it is thus rare and extremely expensive. It is said that the Emperor needs the permission of the Imperial Council to have a glass of it once a year. That is some fine wine. In order to harass the owner of the Alto into selling his land cheap, Sweebud had to hire more than a few mercenaries. He had to hire the finest private army in Skyrim. Sweebud did not like spending money, but he had agreed to pay the general of the army, a woman called Lesivitra, a gem the size of an apple. He had not given it to her yet. Payment was to be delivered on the success of the mission, but he had trouble sleeping knowing that he was going to be giving up such a prize. He always slept during the day so he could watch his storehouse by night when he knew the thieves were about. Except for his old brother, who's smarter than him. Anyway, that brings us to this moment when, after a fitful sleep, Sweebud woke up at about noon and surprised a thief in his bedroom. The thief was Eslaf. Eslaf had been contemplating a leap from the window 100 feet down into the branches of a tree beyond the walls of the fortified palace, and a tumble into a stack of hay. Anyone who has ever attempted such a feat will testify that it takes some concentration and nerve to do such a thing. I mean, I would imagine so. When he saw that the rich man sleeping in the room had awakened, both left him, and Eslaf slipped behind a tall ornamental shield on display to wait for Sweebud to go back to sleep. Sweebud did not go back to sleep. He had heard nothing, but could feel someone in the room with him. He stood up and began pacing the room. Sweebud paced and gradually decided that he was imagining things. No one was there. His fortune was safe and secure. He was returning to his bed when he heard a clunk. Turning around, he saw the gem, the one he was to give to Lucifitra on the floor by the Atmorian cavalry shield. A hand reached out from behind the shield and grabbed it up. "Thief!" Sweetbud cried out, grabbing a jeweled Akraviri katana from the wall and lunging at the shield. The fight between Eslaf and Sweetbud will not go down in the annals of Great Duels. Sweetbud did not know how to use a sword, and Eslaf was no expert in blocking with a shield. It was clumsy, it was awkward. Sweetbud was furious, but was psychologically incapable of using the sword in any way that would damage its fine filigree, reducing its market value. Eslaf kept moving, dragging the shield with him, trying to keep it between him and the blade, which is, after all, the most essential part of any block. Sweetbud screamed in frustration as he struck at the shield, bumping its way across the room. He even tried negotiating with the thief, explaining that the gem was promised to a great warrior named Lucifitra, and if he would give it back, Sweetbud would happily give him something else in return. Eslaf was not a genius, but he did not believe that. By the time Sweetbud's guards came to the bedroom in response to their master's calls, he had succeeded in backing the shield into a window. They fell on the shield, having considerable more expertise with their swords than Sweetbud did, but they discovered that there was no one behind it. Eslaf had leapt out the window and escaped. As he ran heavily through the streets of Jallenheim, making jingling noises from the gold in his pockets and feeling the huge gem chafe where he had hidden it, again, don't want to know. Eslaf did not know where he should go next. He knew only that he could never go back to that town, and he must avoid this warrior named Lucifitra who had claims on the jewel. Eslaf Erol's story is continued in the book King. Alright, friends and fiends and Dovahkiin Supremes, no matter which game you're playing, you now get a permanent increase to block. Even though Eslaf was quite clumsy with the shield, we've learned some essentials in this story. So brings us to King. Gentle reader, or listener, you will not understand a word of what follows unless you have read and committed to memory the first 3 volumes in this series, Beggar, Thief, and Warrior, which leads us up to this, the conclusion. I encourage you to seek them out at your favorite bookseller, or just watch them again here. Or I guess you could also go venturing and find them in the various games. But I got you. We last left Eslaf Erol fleeing for his life, which was a common enough occurrence for him. He had stolen a lot of gold and one particularly large gem from a rich man in Jallenheim named Sweetbud. The thief fled north, spending the gold wildly, as thieves generally do, for all sorts of illicit pleasures. Which would no doubt disturb the gentleman or lady reading this, so I will not go into detail. But you got imaginations, people. The one thing he held on to was the gem. He didn't keep it because of any particular attachment, but because he did not know anyone rich enough to buy it from him. And so he found himself in the ironic situation of being penniless and having in his possession a gem worth millions. "Will you give me a room, some bread, and a flagon of beer in exchange for this?" he asked a tavern's keep in the little village of Cravensfold, which was so far north it was half situated on the Sea of Ghosts. The tavern keeper looked at it suspiciously. "It's just crystal," Eslaf said quickly, "but isn't it pretty?" "Let me see that," said a young armor-clad woman at the end of the bar. Without waiting permission, she picked up the gem, studied it, and smiled not very sweetly at Eslaf. "Would you join me at my table?" "I'm actually in a bit of a hurry," replied Eslaf, holding out his hand for the stone. "Another time." I do appreciate his dodging out of situations attempt. "Out of respect for my friend, the tavern's keeper, my men and I leave our weapons behind when we come in here," the woman said casually, not handing the gem back but picking up a broom that was sitting against the bar. "I can assure you, however, that I can use this quite effectively as a blunt instrument. Not a weapon, of course, but an instrument to stun, medicinally crush a bone or two, and then, once it's on the inside." "Oh, which table?" asked Eslaf quickly. I like her a lot. The young woman led him to a large table in the back of the tavern where 10 of the biggest Nord brutes Eslaf had ever seen were sitting. They looked at him with polite disinterest, as if he were a strange insect worth briefly studying before crushing. "My name is Lucifitra," she said, and Eslaf blinked. That was the same name Sweetbud had uttered before Eslaf had made his escape. "And these are my lieutenants. I am the commander of a very large, independent army of noble knights. the very best in Skyrim. Most recently, we've been given a job to attack a vineyard in the Alto to force its owner, a man named Larnu, to sell to our employer, a man named Sweebud. Our payment was to be a gem of surpassing size and quality, quite famous and unmistakable. We did as we were asked, and when we went to Sweebud to collect our fee, he told us he was unable to pay due to a recent burglary. In the end, though, he saw things our way and paid us an amount of gold almost equal to the worth of the prized jewel. It did not empty out his treasury entirely, but it meant he was unable to buy the land in Alto after all. So, we were not paid enough, Sweebud has taken a heavy financial blow, and Larno's prized crop of Jazbay has been temporarily destroyed for naught. Lacifitra took a long, slow drink of her mead before continuing. Now, I wonder, could you tell me how you came in possession of the gem we were promised? Eslaf did not answer at once. Instead, he took a piece of bread from the plate of the savage-bearded barbarian on his left and ate it. "I'm sorry," he said with his mouth full. "No, of course, I couldn't stop you from taking the gem if I wanted to. And as a matter of fact, I don't mind at all. It's also useless to deny how it came into my possession. I stole it from your employer. I certainly didn't mean you or your noble knights any harm by it, but I can understand why the word of a thief is not suitable for one such as yourself." "No," replied Lacifitra, frowning but her eyes showing amusement. "Not suitable at all." "But before you kill me," Eslaf said, grabbing another piece of bread, "tell me how is it suitable for noble knights such as yourself to be paid twice for one job? I have no honor myself, but I would have thought that since Sweebud took a profit loss to pay you, and now you have the gem, your handsome profit is not entirely honorable." Lacifitra picked up the broom and looked at Eslaf. Then she laughed. "What is your name, thief?" "Eslaf," said the thief. "We will take the gem, as it was promised to us. But you are right, we should not be paid twice for the same job. So," said the warrior woman, putting down the broomstick, "you are our new employer. What would you have your own army do for you?" Many people could find quite a few good uses for their own army, but Eslaf was not among them. He searched his brain, and finally it was decided that it was a debt to be paid later. For her brutality, Lacifitra was a simple woman, raised, he learned, by the very army she commanded. Fighting and honor were the only things she knew. When Eslaf left Kravensvold, he had an army at his beck and call, but not a coin to his name. He knew he would have to steal something soon. As he wandered the woods, scrounging for food, he was beset with a strange feeling of familiarity. These were the very woods he had been in as a child, also starving, also scrounging. When he had come out on the road, he found that he had come back on the kingdom where he had been raised by the dear, stupid, shy maid Drizba. I mean, come on, she was just doing the best she could. She didn't have to take him. Don't be so harsh. He was in Aeroguard. It had fallen even deeper into despair since his youth. The shops that had refused him food were boarded up, abandoned. The only people left were hollow, hopeless figures so ravaged by taxation, despotism, and barbaric raids that they were too weak to flee. Eslaf realized how lucky he was to have gotten out in his youth. There was, however, a castle and a king. Eslaf immediately made plans to raid the treasury. As usual, he watched the place carefully, taking note of the security and the habits of the guards. This took some time. In the end, he realized there was no security and no guards. He walked in the front door and down the empty corridors of the treasury. It was full of precisely nothing except one man. He was Eslaf's age, but looked much older. "There's nothing to steal," he said. "Would that there was." King Unopth, though prematurely aged, had the same white blonde hair and blue eyes like broken glass that Eslaf had. In fact, he resembled Sweebud and Lacifitra as well. And though Eslaf had never met the ruined landlord of the Alto, Larnu, he looked like him too. Not surprisingly, since they were quintuplets. "So, you have nothing?" asked Eslaf gently. "Nothing except my poor kingdom, curse it," the king grumbled. "Before I came to the throne, it was powerful and rich, but I inherited none of that. Only the title. For my entire life, I've had responsibility thrust on my shoulders, but never the means to handle it properly. I look over the desolation which is my birthright, and I hate it. If it were possible to steal a kingdom, I would not lift a finger to stop you." "Hoo-hoo," It turned out, quite possible to steal a kingdom. Eslaf became known as Unop, a deception easily done given their physical similarities. The real Unop, taking the name Yelkanu, happily left his demesne, becoming eventually a simple worker in the vineyards of the Alto. For the first time free of responsibility, he fell into his new life with gusto, the years melting off him. He had a happy ending, and his brother got help on the vineyards. The new Unop called in his favor with Lucifitra, using her army to restore peace to the kingdom of Aeroguard. Now that it was safe, business and commerce began to return to the land, and Eslaf reduced the tyrannical taxes to encourage it to grow. Upon hearing that, Sweetbud, ever nervous about losing his money, elected to return to the land of his birth. When he died years later, out of greed, he had refused to name someone as an heir, so the kingdom received his entire fortune. Eslaf used part of the gold to buy the vineyards of the Alto, after hearing great things of it from Unop. And so it was that Aeroguard was returned to its previous prosperity by the fifth-born child of King Utlaf, Eslaf Erol, beggar, thief, warrior of sorts, and king. And that concludes the adventures of Eslaf Erol by Reven from Skyrim and Oblivion. Speaking of which, do take an increase to your two-handed in Skyrim and your blunt skill in Oblivion. Hopefully all these skills we've increased during tonight's tales will help us fight away nightmares a little bit more efficiently. But I do want to thank you for indulging me in my nerdy reading tonight. I've been playing a little too much Skyrim, and I think it's starting to show and it's bleeding into my life, but I really liked reading the story, and I still feel so bad for the mother in the beginning of the tale. That is an awful amount of pain for 3 months. Oh my god. Ow. But this is one of those stories where everything works out in the end, so it's not really at all a ghost story, but it definitely is a fairy tale, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's questing adventure, and do let me know if you'd like more readings like this. I really enjoy doing this as well, so let me know in the comments below. Now, off to sleep and dream what you will, or stay a while and enjoy another tale. Whichever you choose, I'll speak to you again, and until then, stay spooky, my friends. Good night.